Self-awareness is the first and most powerful step in becoming who you truly are. It is the foundation of authentic living, the mirror that allows you to see yourself clearly without masks or illusions. When you are self-aware, you begin to understand your thoughts, emotions, values, strengths, and weaknesses. You recognize why you act in certain ways and what truly drives your decisions. Without this awareness, people often live on autopilot, following routines and expectations set by others, rather than living in alignment with their true selves. Self-awareness brings clarity. It helps you understand what matters to you and what doesn't. It reveals the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. Many people live their lives seeking approval, chasing success, or trying to fit into someone else's idea of happiness. But when you turn inward and start observing yourself honestly, you begin to see the difference between the life you were told to live and the one you are meant to live. True awareness begins with reflection. Taking time alone, away from distractions, helps you listen to your inner voice. Ask yourself questions that go beyond the surface. Who am I? What do I believe in? What do I truly want? And what fears hold me back? Writing your thoughts down can make your inner world clearer. Patterns begin to appear. You see what inspires you and what drains you. This is how self-discovery begins. Not through others, but through understanding your own heart. Mindfulness plays an important role in developing self-awareness. When you observe your thoughts without judging them, you stop being controlled by them. You begin to notice how emotions rise and fade, how your mind reacts to people and situations. You start responding consciously instead of reacting impulsively. This simple awareness transforms your emotional life. You become calmer, more patient, and more connected to yourself. Self-awareness also means accepting both your strengths and weaknesses. Many people avoid facing their flaws because it feels uncomfortable, but denying them only creates inner conflict. When you acknowledge your imperfections, they lose power over you. You no longer need to hide behind a perfect image. You begin to live with honesty and compassion for yourself. This honesty is the beginning of true confidence. Another aspect of self-awareness is understanding how others perceive you. Sometimes we are blind to parts of ourselves that others can see clearly. Listening to honest feedback from people you trust can open your eyes to new perspectives. It helps you grow and improve without losing your sense of self. From childhood, society conditions us to think, behave, and succeed in specific ways. We learn to please others, to chase grades, money, or recognition. Over time, we start believing that our worth depends on meeting those standards. Self-awareness breaks that illusion. It helps you question your conditioning and separate what is truly yours from what was imposed on you. You begin to see which beliefs limit you and which ones empower you. This awareness gives you freedom, the freedom to choose your path, your values, and your definition of happiness. Emotions are another gateway to self-awareness. Instead of suppressing feelings, learn to understand them. Anger may point to injustice, sadness may reveal unhealed wounds, and fear may show where you need courage. Every emotion carries a message. When you learn to listen to them, you gain control over your inner world. You no longer get lost in emotional storms because you understand their meaning. Spiritually, self-awareness is often described as awakening. It is realizing that you are not your thoughts, not your roles, not your fears. You are the observer behind them. When you reach this understanding, peace naturally arises. You stop being consumed by what others think of you. Success and failure no longer define your worth. You simply exist as yourself, aware, calm, and free. Of course, developing self-awareness is not easy. It requires courage to face uncomfortable truths. It may reveal parts of yourself you've ignored for years, but that discomfort is part of the transformation. Growth is never comfortable, but it is always rewarding. The more honest you become with yourself, the more authentic and peaceful your life becomes. When self-awareness deepens, everything changes. Your decisions become more aligned with your values. Your relationships become more genuine because you no longer wear masks to please others. Your goals become meaningful because they come from your heart, not from pressure or comparison. You start to trust your intuition, your judgment, and your inner voice. Life stops feeling like a race and begins to feel like a journey of discovery. Self-awareness is not a one-time achievement. It is a lifelong process. You are constantly changing, learning, and evolving. Every experience teaches you something new about yourself. The key is to stay curious, open, and willing to grow. The more aware you become, the more authentic you feel. You stop pretending and start being. In the end, self-awareness is the foundation of everything. Peace, confidence, purpose, and love. It teaches you that you do not need to become someone else to be enough. You only need to return to yourself, to the person you were before the world told you who to be. That is the true meaning of becoming who you truly are. Letting go of external validation is the natural next step after developing self-awareness, because once you understand who you truly are, you no longer need the world to confirm your worth. External validation means seeking approval, praise, or acceptance from others to feel valuable or successful. It's one of the biggest barriers to authenticity because it shifts your focus from inner truth to external judgment. When you live for validation, your choices are guided not by what feels right to you, but by what earns applause from others. You measure yourself through comparisons, likes, and opinions, losing touch with your inner voice. That's why self-awareness and freedom from external validation are deeply connected. Self-awareness helps you recognize when you are acting out of fear of rejection or desire for approval. It makes you aware of the subtle ways you change your behavior to fit expectations. Once you see these patterns clearly, you gain the strength to stop living for others and start living for yourself. People often begin their journey by trying to please everyone, family, friends, society. But when you act from awareness, knowing your values, your emotions, and your intentions, you make choices that feel right in your heart, even if they don't bring instant approval. This is where self-respect is born. You realize that being authentic may disappoint some people, but it will bring you peace. The process of letting go of external validation often begins with discomfort. At first, it feels lonely because you are breaking habits that once gave you security. You might fear being misunderstood or rejected. But as you keep returning to your self-awareness, that calm understanding of who you are, you start realizing that the opinions of others are temporary, while your truth is permanent. You learn to listen more to your inner voice than the noise outside. Gradually, your confidence becomes self-sustaining. Imagine self-awareness as the foundation of a house, and freedom from external validation as the walls that protect it. Without the foundation, the walls collapse. Without the walls, the foundation is exposed to outside pressure. Together, they create inner stability. Self-awareness tells you who you are. Letting go of validation allows you to live as that person without fear. When you combine both, you move from dependence to independence, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. When you are aware of yourself, you can clearly see how much of your past behavior was shaped by the need to be liked or accepted. You might remember moments when you hid your true opinions to avoid conflict or changed your appearance to please others. Awareness makes these patterns visible, and visibility leads to transformation. You start choosing authenticity over approval. You begin saying no when something doesn't align with your values, even if it disappoints others. That simple act of honesty is freedom. Letting go of external validation also deepens emotional balance. When your sense of worth comes from within, criticism doesn't break you and praise doesn't inflate you. You remain grounded. You learn to appreciate feedback without letting it define you. You see others' opinions as reflections of their perspective, not measurements of your value. This emotional independence brings peace because you no longer live under the constant pressure to perform or impress. As your awareness expands, you also start understanding others with more compassion. You realize that most people who seek validation are simply afraid of not being enough, just as you once were. This realization replaces judgment with empathy. You see that true confidence doesn't come from superiority, but from self-acceptance. When you know yourself deeply, you don't need to prove anything. You start valuing quiet authenticity more than loud recognition. In essence, self-awareness and letting go of external validation are two sides of the same journey, the journey toward inner authenticity. Self-awareness awakens you to your real identity. Letting go of validation gives you the courage to live it. The first connects you to your truth. The second protects that truth from being diluted by others' expectations. Together, they create harmony between who you are inside and how you live outside. When you no longer seek validation, your motivation shifts. You act not to be admired, but because it feels right. From a young age, we are taught that mistakes mean failure, that weakness means shame, and that vulnerability should be covered up. We learn to put on masks, pretending to have everything under control, pretending to always be right, pretending to be what others want us to be. This constant pretending creates inner conflict. You live divided between who you are and who you show to the world. That's why letting go of external validation is such an important foundation for embracing imperfection. When you stop chasing approval, you give yourself permission to be real. You understand that your flaws do not make you unworthy. They make you human. Embracing imperfection begins with honesty. It is the courage to look at yourself fully, to acknowledge your fears, insecurities, and mistakes without shame. Instead of trying to fix everything about yourself, you start to listen and understand. You realize that every flaw has a story, every scar has a lesson, and every failure has shaped your strength. You stop treating yourself like a problem that needs solving and start treating yourself like a person who deserves compassion. This shift in mindset is transformative. It takes you from self-criticism to self-acceptance, from rejection to understanding. Letting go of external validation helps you reach this acceptance because you no longer judge yourself through society's impossible standards. Society often rewards perfection. Perfect bodies, perfect lives, perfect success stories. But perfection is an illusion. It's a filter that hides reality. When you constantly chase perfection, you create anxiety and self-doubt because perfection has no finish line. You understand that living your values doesn't mean being perfect. It means being sincere. You might fail to live up to your standards at times, but instead of condemning yourself, you learn and adjust. This gentle honesty keeps you growing. Without self-acceptance, alignment becomes rigid and exhausting because you constantly judge yourself for not being good enough. But when you accept your imperfections, you allow room for progress instead of perfection. You stay true to your direction even if the journey isn't flawless. Aligning actions with values also strengthens your emotional stability. When your behavior reflects your beliefs, there is less confusion, less guilt, and less regret. You stop fighting inner battles because your heart and your actions move together. You feel whole. This harmony reduces anxiety because you no longer live under the pressure of pretending or compromising your truth. Life starts to feel simpler and lighter because your decisions come from clarity, not obligation. This alignment also affects your relationships. When you live according to your values, you attract people who respect and share those values. Your connections become more genuine because they are based on honesty, not performance. You no longer need to hide your opinions or suppress your emotions to keep others comfortable. You speak with integrity, act with consistency, and build trust naturally. People sense authenticity, and it inspires them to do the same. The connection between embracing imperfection and alignment also lies in vulnerability. When you accept your flaws, you allow others to see your humanity. You become real, approachable, and trustworthy. That vulnerability gives your words and actions sincerity. It's easy to talk about values like kindness, honesty, or courage, but living them requires humility. The willingness to act according to your beliefs even when it exposes your weaknesses. Embracing imperfection makes that possible because you're no longer afraid to be seen as imperfect while doing what's right. There's also a deep sense of empowerment in alignment. When you live by your values, external opinions lose their power. You no longer need validation to feel secure because your confidence comes from integrity. You know who you are and what you stand for. Even when others disagree or misunderstand you, you remain grounded because your actions are rooted in your truth. This stability is one of the greatest rewards of authenticity. Alignment transforms your everyday life. It guides your decisions, what kind of work you do, how you treat others, how you spend your time, and what kind of energy you allow into your life. It makes you intentional rather than reactive. You stop living by default and start living by design. Every choice, big or small, becomes an expression of who you are. Over time, this consistency builds inner peace. You no longer feel torn between desire and duty because they begin to merge into one purpose. Ultimately, alignment is the outer expression of inner authenticity. Self-awareness shows you your values. Letting go of external validation gives you the freedom to honor them. Embracing imperfection gives you the compassion to live them honestly, even when you stumble. Together, they lead you to integrity, a state where your mind, heart, and actions move in the same direction. You start feeling an inner pull toward honesty, freedom, and purpose, even though it means facing fear. That's the point where courage becomes essential. Facing fear doesn't mean being fearless, it means acting despite fear. It's the quiet decision to trust your values more than your doubts. The connection between alignment and courage is simple but profound. When your life reflects your core values, you can no longer tolerate what feels false. But to keep living authentically, you must be willing to confront fear. Fear of failure, rejection, and uncertainty. Alignment gives you direction, courage gives you motion. Without courage, alignment remains an idea. Without alignment, courage becomes aimless. Together, they build a life rooted in integrity and strength. Fear is not the enemy, it's a sign that you are stepping beyond limitation. It appears not to stop you, but to remind you that you are entering a new stage of growth. People who never face fear rarely grow, because fear is the border between the old self and the new one. When you learn to face it consciously, it loses power. You begin to see that uncertainty is not chaos, it's potential. It's the space where transformation happens. Every meaningful change in life begins with uncertainty because you cannot create a new path while clinging to the safety of the old one. When you live in alignment with your values, fear becomes a teacher instead of a threat. It reveals what matters most to you. For example, if honesty is one of your values, you might fear telling the truth because it could cost you approval or relationships. But the discomfort you feel in hiding the truth is often greater than the fear of speaking it. That tension is the proof of your alignment calling you forward. The more aware you are of your values, the more you realize that betraying them hurts more than facing fear ever could. Embracing imperfection, the previous step, also plays a key role here. When you accept your flaws and failures as part of your humanity, fear loses much of its grip. You no longer need to appear perfect before taking action. You allow yourself to make mistakes and learn from them. This attitude turns fear from paralysis into progress. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to act and start moving forward even with uncertainty. That's how authentic growth happens, not in comfort, but in courage. Fear thrives in the absence of trust. When you trust yourself, you don't need to control every outcome. Living by your values gives you that trust. It builds an inner stability that remains steady even when the future is unclear. You start to realize that not knowing everything is not failure, it's life unfolding. Uncertainty becomes less terrifying when you understand that it's a natural part of walking your own path. Each step into the unknown deepens your confidence, proving that you are capable of handling whatever comes next. Facing fear also strengthens your relationship with authenticity. Each time you act with courage, you reinforce your integrity. You start seeing yourself as someone who follows through, someone who lives by conviction, not by convenience. That realization builds quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't rely on applause or approval. It's the moment you realize you no longer need to be fearless to be strong. You only need to be honest enough to keep moving forward. Fear and uncertainty also test your alignment in practical ways. It's easy to live according to your values when things are comfortable, but true authenticity shows in difficult moments, when doing the right thing costs you comfort, stability, or acceptance. These moments reveal how deeply your values are rooted. When you choose to stay true despite fear, you discover a level of strength you didn't know existed. You realize that integrity is more valuable than approval, and purpose is more fulfilling than safety. The relationship between alignment and fear is like a dance. One gives direction, the other gives growth. You can't truly live your values without confronting fear, and you can truly overcome fear without grounding yourself in your values. They balance and complete each other. Fear becomes the test that confirms your authenticity. Each time you overcome it, your sense of self becomes stronger, your inner peace deeper, and your trust in life greater. Facing uncertainty is also an act of faith. Faith in your journey, your resilience, and your truth. It's understanding that life will never be fully predictable, but that your values can guide you through any situation. You begin to replace the question, "What if I fail?" with "What if I grow?" You stop fearing change and start embracing it as a natural part of becoming. That shift in mindset turns uncertainty into possibility. When you face fear with awareness and alignment, life begins to feel freer. You no longer shrink from challenges or avoid risks because they make you uncomfortable. Instead, you see them as opportunities to practice authenticity. Every time you face fear, you peel away another layer of pretense. You become more real, more grounded, and more alive. The courage to face uncertainty transforms your character. It builds resilience, deepens wisdom, and strengthens your faith in yourself. In the end, facing fear and uncertainty is where your inner truth meets the outer world. Self-awareness shows you who you are. Letting go of external validation gives you the freedom to be that person. Embracing imperfection teaches you to accept your humanity. Aligning your actions with your values gives your life direction. And facing fear gives you the strength to live that truth boldly. Each step builds upon the last, forming a complete circle of authenticity. When you walk through fear with integrity, you no longer live by reaction but by intention. You realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that your truth is more important than your fear. That is when you truly begin to live, not just existing safely, but growing, evolving, and becoming who you were always meant to be. The sixth and final step in becoming who you truly are is cultivating self-acceptance and inner peace, and it flows naturally from the courage to face fear and uncertainty. When you finally confront your fears, step into the unknown, and stay true to your values despite challenges, you arrive at a deeper understanding of yourself, one that leads to acceptance, calm, and genuine peace. This is not the peace that comes from having everything perfect, but the kind that arises when you no longer fight yourself or the world. It's the quiet strength that comes when you are no longer running from fear, no longer pretending to be someone else, and no longer chasing validation from outside sources. It is the moment when you realize that everything you were looking for, worth, love, and stability, already exists within you. In the previous step, you faced fear and uncertainty by trusting yourself and acting in alignment with your values. That process often strips away illusions. It reveals the real you, raw, imperfect, but authentic. And when you meet that version of yourself with compassion instead of judgment, you unlock self-acceptance. It means looking at yourself fully, your past, your mistakes, your scars, your doubts, and saying, I am enough. Not because you are flawless, but because you are real. Self-acceptance is not resignation. It is understanding that growth and imperfection can coexist. You stop needing to be perfect to deserve peace. When you live in fear, your mind is constantly fighting, trying to control outcomes, hide weaknesses, or please others. But when you start facing fear, as discussed earlier, that inner battle begins to fade. You learn that peace doesn't come from avoiding challenges, it comes from meeting them with courage. The more you face fear, the less it controls you. The less it controls you, the more peaceful you feel inside. That's the connection. Courage opens the door, and acceptance lets you walk through it. Fear teaches you strength, and self-acceptance turns that strength into serenity. True inner peace begins when you stop resisting what is. Many people suffer because they constantly compare their lives to how they think things should be. They carry guilt over the past, anxiety about the future, and disappointment with themselves. But peace comes when you stop fighting those thoughts and simply acknowledge them as part of being human. You begin to realize that your journey, with all its detours and mistakes, has been necessary for your growth. Every failure has shaped your wisdom. Every fear has deepened your strength. Every experience, even painful ones, has brought you closer to your true self. When you accept that, life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a lesson. Self-acceptance also means forgiving yourself. Many people can forgive others but struggle to forgive themselves. They carry the weight of regret and self-blame for years, thinking that punishment equals responsibility. But forgiveness is not about erasing mistakes, it's about releasing the emotional chains that keep you trapped in the past. When you forgive yourself, you reclaim your energy and redirect it toward growth. This act of inner forgiveness transforms fear into understanding and shame into wisdom. You realize that you were doing your best with the awareness you had at the time, and that is enough. This acceptance naturally deepens the peace that comes after facing fear. When you accept yourself fully, fear loses its foundation. You no longer fear judgment because you've stopped judging yourself. You no longer fear rejection because you've learned to give yourself love. You no longer fear failure because you understand that your worth doesn't depend on success. This freedom creates inner stability, a calm confidence that remains unshaken even when life becomes uncertain. In that state, peace is not something you chase, it becomes the natural rhythm of your being. Self-acceptance also changes how you relate to others. When you are at peace within, you stop competing, comparing, and pretending. You can appreciate others without envy and love them without attachment. Relationships become more genuine because they are no longer based on fear or need, but on mutual respect and authenticity. You understand that everyone is fighting their own silent battles, and that realization brings compassion. This empathy further strengthens your inner peace, because you stop expecting perfection from yourself or others. Connecting this step with the previous one reveals a cycle of transformation. Facing fear was about moving through resistance. Self-acceptance is about resting and understanding. In the fifth step, you were learning to trust yourself despite uncertainty. Now, in the sixth, you learn to be gentle with yourself regardless of outcome. Fear demands control, while peace invites surrender. Courage takes action. Acceptance allows stillness. Both are essential. Courage gets you to the mountain. Acceptance lets you enjoy the view. They are not opposites, but complementary forces that balance each other and complete the process of becoming who you truly are. Peace doesn't mean a life without noise, pain, or difficulty. It means your heart stays steady in the middle of it. It means that even when things go wrong, you don't lose yourself in chaos. This is possible only when you accept who you are, your emotions, your past, your journey, without resistance. You no longer need to prove your worth to anyone, not even yourself. You begin to live from a place of authenticity, not anxiety. Your actions become expressions of love, not reactions to fear. In a deeper sense, self-acceptance reconnects you to life itself. When you accept yourself, you align with reality instead of resisting it. You realize that everything, joy, pain, loss, love, is part of the same wholeness. You begin to see beauty in imperfection, lessons in challenges, and peace in simply being. That's when the constant inner noise fades. You start to feel a quiet sense of belonging, not because the world has changed, but because you have. So when we trace the journey from fear to acceptance, it becomes clear that peace is not the absence of struggle. It's the transformation of your relationship with it. You faced fear in step 5. You looked uncertainty in the eye and kept moving forward. Now in step 6, you stop running. You stop fighting. You rest in who you are. You understand that your worth has never been tied to your success, your image, or your perfection. It has always been intrinsic, unshakable, and enough. Becoming who you truly are ends not with a loud victory, but with quiet realization. You realize that everything you were searching for, purpose, clarity, courage, love, and peace, was always within you. Fear taught you strength. Acceptance taught you serenity. Together they form the final balance between doing and being, between courage and calm. And in that balance, you discover the essence of authenticity, a life that flows effortlessly from your inner truth, free from masks, fear, and self-doubt. That is the moment you truly become yourself, whole, grounded, and at peace. They want to be seen as good, successful, attractive, or intelligent. But this constant need for affirmation creates emotional exhaustion and inner emptiness. It's like chasing a moving target, because no matter how much validation you get, it never feels enough. True fulfillment doesn't come from being admired, but from being aligned with your true self. Self-awareness exposes this truth. When you are self-aware, you start noticing how external opinions influence your mood. You realize how much your self-worth fluctuates depending on whether people praise or criticize you. This realization becomes a turning point. You begin to ask yourself, why do I need others to tell me I'm good enough when I already know my intentions, my effort, and my growth? That question marks the beginning of inner freedom. Letting go of external validation doesn't mean becoming indifferent or arrogant. It means learning to validate yourself first, to recognize your own worth without needing anyone else's confirmation. It's about replacing external applause with internal peace. When you stop seeking validation, you stop comparing your journey with others. You stop molding your personality to fit in. You start expressing yourself honestly, even if not everyone agrees with you. This shift creates a deep sense of confidence because your self-worth no longer depends on unstable opinions. You start living from authenticity rather than approval. Self-awareness teaches you that every time you act only to please others, you move further away from your real self. You begin to feel disconnected, anxious, and unsure of who you are. You pursue goals that align with your values rather than those that bring attention. You express yourself naturally without rehearsing what others might think. Life becomes lighter, more peaceful, and more meaningful. You stop performing and start living. Ultimately, the freedom from external validation is the reward of true self-awareness. When you understand yourself completely, you no longer chase approval because you already know your worth. You recognize that validation from others can be pleasant, but never essential. The real validation, the one that brings peace, confidence, and fulfillment, comes from within. And once you learn to find it inside yourself, you finally become who you truly are, Embracing your imperfections is the third essential step in becoming who you truly are, and it connects deeply with letting go of external validation. Once you stop living for others' approval, you begin to see yourself through your own eyes, not through the distorted lens of judgment or expectation. That's when you realize that being human means being imperfect, and that imperfection is not weakness, it's authenticity. Embracing imperfection means accepting every part of yourself, the light and the shadow, the success and the failure, the confidence and the doubt. It means no longer hiding the parts of you that feel unworthy or flawed. When you stop seeking validation, you no longer need to appear perfect to be accepted. You start to understand that real self-worth doesn't come from appearing flawless, but from accepting your true, unfiltered self. For most of life, people are conditioned to hide their imperfections. The moment you achieve one ideal, another appears. True peace comes when you step away from that endless chase and embrace the beauty of imperfection. You begin to see that flaws are not barriers but bridges. They connect you to others because everyone has them. Imperfection is what makes you relatable, kind, and real. Self-awareness, the first step, allows you to see your imperfections clearly without fear. You begin to understand why you act the way you do, why you have certain weaknesses, and how your experiences shape them. Then, letting go of external validation helps you stop apologizing for them. Together, these steps create space for acceptance. You realize that perfection is not the goal, wholeness is. You don't need to erase your imperfections, you need to embrace them as part of your unique story. When you accept your imperfections, you stop hiding. You stop wasting energy pretending to be someone else. You begin to live with authenticity. This acceptance brings emotional freedom. You no longer feel crushed by mistakes because you understand they are opportunities for growth. You no longer feel embarrassed by flaws because you see them as natural. This mindset transforms not only your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with others. When you accept your own imperfections, you become more compassionate toward others. You stop judging people so harshly because you know everyone carries invisible struggles. You start connecting with people on a deeper level, not through perfection, but through vulnerability. Letting go of external validation also makes it easier to embrace imperfection because it removes the fear of judgment. When you are no longer obsessed with what others think, their criticism loses power. You start seeing feedback as perspective, not as a verdict on your worth. You realize that other people's opinions reflect their own insecurities and experiences, not your truth. This understanding gives you inner peace. You become comfortable being imperfect in front of others. You can laugh at your mistakes, admit your flaws, and move forward without shame. Embracing imperfection doesn't mean you stop improving yourself. It means you grow from a place of love instead of rejection. When you accept yourself as you are, growth becomes natural. You are no longer driven by the fear of not being good enough, but by the joy of becoming better. You see self-improvement as evolution, not punishment. You learn from failure instead of hiding from it. You understand that healing and growth take time, and that progress matters more than perfection. In this way, embracing imperfection becomes the emotional healing that follows letting go of validation. Once you stop performing for the world, you start living for yourself. Once you stop fearing mistakes, you start learning from them. Once you stop rejecting your flaws, you start transforming them into wisdom. This acceptance creates an inner stability that external approval could never give. You begin to trust yourself even when you stumble, to believe in your worth even when life gets messy. That is what real confidence looks like. Not the absence of flaws, but the presence of self-acceptance. The more you embrace imperfection, the lighter life becomes. You stop trying to meet unrealistic expectations and instead enjoy being real. You begin to see beauty in imperfection. The way cracked pottery becomes stronger when repaired with gold in Japanese kintsugi, or how an off-key note in music adds soul. In the same way, your imperfections add character, depth, and authenticity to your life. They remind you that you are alive, growing, and evolving. Ultimately, embracing imperfection is the act of returning home to yourself. It is the understanding that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, success, or happiness. You simply need to be present, honest, and kind to yourself. It's about saying, I am enough as I am, even as I continue to grow. When you reach this level of acceptance, you no longer crave validation because you no longer doubt your worth. You live freely, speak truthfully, and love yourself fully. So, self-awareness shows you who you are. Letting go of external validation frees you from pretending. And embracing imperfection allows you to love the person you discover. Together, they form a cycle of healing and authenticity. You become grounded, confident, and peaceful. Not because life is perfect, but because you finally accept that it doesn't have to be. Aligning your actions with your values is the fourth step in becoming who you truly are, and it naturally grows from embracing your imperfections. Once you accept yourself fully, flaws, fears, and all, you gain the clarity and courage to live in a way that reflects what truly matters to you. Alignment means harmony between what you believe and what you do. It is living truthfully, where your choices, behavior, and lifestyle mirror your inner values. When your actions and values match, you feel peace. When they don't, you feel conflict. Many people experience inner tension because they act in ways that go against their deeper beliefs, often to please others or to meet external expectations. That's where the connection between embracing imperfection and alignment becomes clear. When you accept your imperfections, you no longer pretend to be someone else, and that honesty allows you to act in ways that feel true to your authentic self. Before embracing imperfection, many people live behind masks, trying to appear ideal in others' eyes. They choose paths that look perfect rather than ones that feel right. This creates a silent disconnection, a feeling that life looks good on the outside but feels wrong on the inside. But once you stop chasing perfection, you stop pretending. You become more honest about your desires, beliefs, and priorities. That honesty naturally pushes you toward alignment because you no longer need to hide what you value most. You stop saying yes to things that go against your heart and start making choices that reflect your truth. This is how authenticity takes root, through consistent alignment between your inner self and your outer life. Living in alignment with your values begins with knowing what those values are. Many people never stop to define them. They drift through life following inherited beliefs, what their family, culture, or society says is important, without questioning whether those values truly belong to them. Self-awareness, the first step, helps you recognize your genuine values. Letting go of validation helps you stop betraying them for approval. Embracing imperfection helps you accept that you won't always live them perfectly. Once you understand and accept this, you can begin to align your life with purpose and integrity. Alignment is not about perfection, but consistency. There will be moments when you fall short or make choices that don't fully match your ideals, and that's okay. The difference now is awareness. When you embrace imperfection, you understand that mistakes are not failures of character, but reminders of growth. This mindset prevents guilt from turning into shame and helps you realign when you drift off course. Each time you act against your values, you feel discomfort, not as punishment, but as guidance pointing you back to your truth. The more you listen to that inner signal, the stronger your alignment becomes. For example, if one of your values is honesty, but you sometimes hide your feelings to avoid conflict, you may feel uneasy afterward. That uneasiness is your inner compass reminding you to return to authenticity. When you live in alignment, you begin to trust yourself because you know your words and actions come from integrity. You no longer feel like two different people, one in public and another in private. That unity of character brings confidence, peace, and inner strength. Embracing imperfections supports this alignment by teaching you self-compassion. That is the essence of becoming who you truly are. When you live in alignment, you stop searching for meaning because you're already living it. You don't need to prove anything to anyone because your life itself becomes your message. You walk with calm confidence, knowing that even in your imperfections, you are living truthfully. And that is where real peace begins, not in perfection, but in the quiet, steady harmony between who you are inside and how you live each day. Facing fear and uncertainty is the fifth vital step in becoming who you truly are, and it naturally connects with aligning your actions with your values. Once you begin living according to your beliefs, you inevitably face situations that test your courage. Living in alignment sounds peaceful in theory, but in practice, it requires strength, because staying true to yourself often means walking away from comfort, approval, or predictability. Fear and uncertainty appear the moment you choose authenticity over conformity. Every time you decide to live according to your values, you step into the unknown, and that's where real growth happens. Fear is the natural resistance that arises when you move closer to your truth. It whispers doubts like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm not good enough? These questions create hesitation, keeping you trapped in familiar patterns even when they no longer serve you. But the deeper your alignment with your values becomes, the harder it is to stay in that comfort zone.